So we'll call the meeting to order, the approval of the agenda and order of business. I see that under committee reports, we don't have the mayor's and warden's one, but I will give an update on that today. And the agenda. Does anybody have anything else they want to? Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. Public input, I understand we do have public input. Susie Fraser.
Yep.
She's in the building. There. Yeah, get the mask on.
It's either hot or cold in here.
Morning, Susie.
Good morning, how are you all?
You know, whatever, it's pretty good, I guess.
Can I start?
Yep. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm here as a business owner. I'm here as a member of the merchants group. I'm here as a member of Artata. My printer died as of on cue last night, so my handwritten notes are. When I saw this before it ended up in the fireplace, I couldn't believe it that the purpose of the amendment was to permit residential uses of 5 to 10 dwelling units per structure in the central commercial zone by development. I think this issue is too big to move forward with at this point in time. I think this needs to go to the villagers so there can be public input. So I'm asking that this can be delayed.
I can't really comment on that at this moment. Council's already held a public hearing. And it's up to them entirely whether we move forward or don't. But we will discuss when we get to that point, your request.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you can ask the question.
What did you have in mind when you say public input?
Well, when Vartata sent this notice out to alert people that this was happening, the input that we got was 100% against this development agreement. There's just too many issues that are not answered. There's the water issue, there's the sewer issue, there's the parking issue, there's the density issue. I mean, the village is struggling already to deal with these issues and to load up the density downtown and compromise our already compromised commercial core is not in the best interest of the village. You know, we could become a bedroom community to Halifax if this keeps encroaching on our commercial zone. And I just can't understand how this would just pass through with a nod without serious input from the villagers.
I would say this much, that when it comes to a development agreement, things like their ability to provide water, their ability to provide parking, their ability to have capacity for the sewer hookup are all things that will be taken into consideration during the request. And they'd have to satisfy those needs.
But it's already shown that the sewer cannot handle what's here now already. I mean, you spoke at that last and said, okay, let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's just charge everybody X, Y, Z to make this sewer problem go away. The sewer problem hasn't gone away because we've still got more people coming into the village and we can't service them.
Well, if our sewer system didn't have the capacity to address the needs of a development agreement, then we wouldn't approve it.
So why put it on the table in the first place?
They may be able to demonstrate a method, or we may be able to expand our system.
You know, why not look at where Lunenburg is looking is at the outside of the village and looking, if you're looking for housing and you know, let's talk about affordable housing, because you're not going to get affordable housing in downtown Chester. So, you know, why not look at the outskirts of the village if you're looking to put in high density residential?
That's not really high density. Gareth, you had something.
I know that maybe Ian or Tara would be better to speak to it, but I'm just wondering if Susie might not be aware of the wastewater study that's underway currently.
Yeah, which is looking at expansion of our systems all across the municipality.
So there is a study, I guess I'll speak to it. I guess there is a study underway that is looking at all of the existing municipal wastewater systems. So it's not dealing with water, but my understanding, I'm not really involved in this
No.
project, but it's looking at the sewer capacity and will be coming back. Council hasn't seen the report yet, either of staff, but the intent is that we'll come back with recommendations on upgrades or expansions. So I just to your point of why I put it on the table, I think they are also.
We're looking at that all at the same time.
It doesn't address all of your concerns, and I really don't want to be the focus here, but
No.
just wanted to make that.
And it doesn't, so let's make sure that the wastewater is a positive thing before you jump into the next thing of putting 10 units in every dwelling in the commercial core downtown Chester.
Yeah,
That's not what this is. This is not putting 10 units in every building in downtown Chester. This is adding a tool in the toolbox for planning so that if you have an oddball request, which we have, the council can deal with it. It's not a blank carte blanche that any developer can walk in here and ask for a 10-unit building in that zone. If they did, the answer would likely be no. It's just we have a case that we cannot get to with our existing bylaws, where we have a 10-unit building, and one of them is a commercial unit that has been empty for years. And the only way to address it is to make a change in our bylaws to allow basically council to deal with that oddball request. And so this isn't opening the floodgates, and there's a lot of hysteria. That's not what this is. I think this council understands the value of the village and the character of Chester and what brings people here. But most, I'm going to call it urban centers, like where we have some density, have multiple layers of approval. You have like your basic development permits, you have your site plan approvals, and most have a development agreement process for oddball requests that don't fit well in our bylaws. That's what this is. We're missing that tool. So when people come with a legitimate request that makes sense, and then in this case, we have one in front of us, that we have a building on Queen Street that has 10 units in it already, has for many, many years. One of them is a commercial, is zoned as a commercial unit, but it's been vacant because nobody's ever set up a shop in there. It was a shoe store years ago, you know the one. But nobody's gonna put a shoe store back in there. And the building doesn't even suit, like it really doesn't even fit well with the building. We want to deal with it. It doesn't make any sense to drop a zone over top of that building. That spot zone kind of nonsense makes no sense. And that building goes away and then it's built again as a 10-unit building. That doesn't make sense. So we want to create a tool that allows council to deal with oddball requests. And that's a tool that most centers, if you look at Kentville or Mahone Bay or any place like us, they have that. But that doesn't mean we would undermine the things that are the values of our village. We value them too, of course. I have a business in Chester. I know what brings people to Chester. So this isn't opening the floodgates at all. If somebody comes tomorrow after if we approve this and says they want to build a 10-unit building in Chester, the answer will likely be no. And that process of even entertaining that proposal requires public input.
every time.
So it's not going to be a surprise if somebody comes knocking on the door at all. So this is just adding a tool for us to deal with oddballs.
Yes, Derek.
So just to go back to your letter, I read your letter. Concern seems to be not the existing proposal, but the overall impact on the rest of the downtown core. One change that drove this process is the conversion of the one commercial unit in that 10-unit building. Do you have a concern about that, or is your concern the larger?
No, I just feel like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, let's by fixing one thing, let's just open it up. To me, it's the thin edge of the wedge.
Fair Garth, you said you didn't want to be the focus, but I might have to make you the focus.
He's used to it.
I know in your report, which I read a couple of times last night, actually, well-written report, you do address the issue of spot zoning. That's one that Andre raised. On page 6 of your report. Why did you reject the possibility of doing spot zoning on this particular spot, this particular building?
So generally, spot zoning is not good planning practice, and this council has a fairly strong history of speaking against that. The former councillor in your seat was actually a very vocal opponent for not looking at spot zoning. It is always something that council can do. It's just hard to justify from a planning perspective. So that's why I wasn't recommending it. It is always an option. I was just going with the history of, and I think I see some nods around the table here, so maybe other.
It's a bad practice.
So it's just generally not considered to be best planning practice.
Not suggesting I support it, I want to answer it on the record.
Yeah, no, so that is, I'm just trying to provide an answer to your question.
Karen?
I would just add, and I think I could be, you can correct me, Gareth, if I'm wrong. I think even in this case, to spot zone, you had to, in order for it to be consistent with all of our policies, there would have had to be adjustments to other policies that would have been more major changes as
I
well.
knew that, I wanted to get that answer on the record.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going.
It wasn't as simple as.
It wasn't as simple as just doing this. That's right.
Wouldn't it require a policy change?
Yes, because so the amendments that we're dealing with, or that we dealt with at last week's public hearing are not what we're speaking about now. We're speaking specifically about 122 Queen Street. And yes, Councillor Wells, to your question, policy changes would be required because the property at 122 Queen Street is listed in Schedule C of the land use bylaw, prior existing uses. And there is a policy in the secondary planning strategy that says changes to prior existing uses are not possible without a policy amendment. Basically, or well, what I should say is the policy says that changes are not permitted to those prior existing uses. And so we would have to delete or alter that policy in order to make change to that.
Which would have opened it up again in a different fashion.
Yeah.
I have some other questions for Gareth. I don't know if I should address them while Susie's here. Get that opportunity to.
We're going to be able to have a discussion before council deals with the whole issue of whether
Because
to.
we do have, and I've talked to over the last couple of days, particularly, I didn't get a chance to speak to everybody that I wrote, I spoke to a lot of people about the concerns that have been raised. So there are some particular questions that are raised that we need to address. But one I want to address now while Susie's here is the one about the village plan review. And in your report on page 5, you talk about you say this amendment may serve as a test case for upcoming discussions and decisions relating to the village plan review. Now that's been raised with me, and I've been trying to determine what you mean by that and how the village plan review, or maybe more particularly how this particular proposal fits into the village plan review.
Sure.
I know you addressed it, but I don't understand what you're saying.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, fair question. So that comment is in relation to, so when this request first came into council, we brought a report back with several options for how council would like us to proceed. And we did that before we went to the Village Planning Advisory Committee. And council gave us some direction at that meeting. And there was discussion around the table, and I can provide those minutes to you if you'd like for reference, where it was discussed that council would like to see development agreements used as a tool going forward. And that was part of the acknowledgement that we are currently in the process of doing the village plan review, but it is start and stop. And council made the decision to proceed with these amendments prior to the completion of the village plan review. But in doing so, council discussed and provided direction to staff to indicate that they would like to see development agreements discussed and potentially used in a more broad sense as part of the village plan review. And that's what that comment is reflecting.
one of the challenges I have, having only been here 3 weeks, is I don't have that background.
No, absolutely, yeah, sorry.
And that would be very helpful in this type of a situation, because I've been reading everything I've been given, but there seem to be some gaps in the information I'm getting. I think I'm catching up very quickly on this one, but I'd like to get those minutes
Absolutely.
and understand it.
Typically, that's not something we would include in a staff report. If we included the whole file, it would be very lengthy, but I'm more than happy to.
My issue is that I wasn't here for those periods of time, so I don't have that.
I understand.
That information. Because I think the concerns that have been raised are legitimate. I think the people like Susie and others that have raised them need to have them addressed. And that's what I propose to do, is have them addressed, regardless of the outcome of this particular matter.
Of course, yeah, and as a staff person, I've been bringing reports and options.
I understand, when I know what to ask for, I can get it. Sometimes I don't know what I should be asking what you want. You know, because there's a lot of information out there. Susie, I know your concerns you're expressing, and I know some of your members have also reached out, talked to some of them, not all of them, corresponded with some of them, and not all of them. And I just want to let you know, I've read the concerns, everything that's come through my hands in the last 48 hours. And those will all be considered. I'm not sure what the outcome is going to be at the end of the day. Wait for this whole process to play out. But thank you for taking the time and appearing for us today.
Okay, thanks, Susie. So we had some other correspondence somebody was going to read related to that
Want
same.
them all read?
Are we moving to that now?
Do you want me to read Susie's letter or are you?
No,
Okay.
Susie's is fine.
All right, so there's a letter from, I'm gonna take this off so you can hear me, a letter from Nancy Hatch. Good day, councilors, with your permission, I would like to provide my comments on the VPAC motion of October 12th, 2021. And then she listed the motion, so moved by Nancy Hatch, seconded by John Carroll, to recommend to council to amend the secondary planning strategy for a development agreement, specifically for 122 Queen Street, to allow the 10th unit to be changed from commercial to residential, and the more widespread implementation of development agreements be discussed as part of the plan review. Motion carried. The intent of this motion was to accommodate the owner of an existing 10-unit building, 9 residential units and 1 commercial unit, by providing a way to legally convert an unrentable commercial space into a usable needed residential space. The planning tool used to accomplish the conversion of the existing building was by development agreement. The intent was not to reintroduce the option of using development agreements throughout the village central commercial zone and open the door to other 10-unit developments. However, it appears that is what council is doing. While development agreements may be useful in planning, they have a dark and greatly abused past. Until such a time as the Village Planning Advisory Committee and Council during the village plan review can agree to guidelines and constraints required for the possible future use of DAs, I'm requesting council permit the conversion of only 122 Queen Street into a 10-unit residential building by development agreement. Thank you for your consideration of this specific request and for an interim pause on the wholesale use of development agreements in the central commercial zone. We have another letter from an email from Philip John. I am a permanent year-round resident of Chester and given the present COVID situation and am unable to attend your meeting. However, I do have major concerns over your amendment permitting residential uses of 5 to 10 dwelling units per structure within the central commercial zone by development agreement. I am seriously concerned that the municipality is not being transparent to the residents of Chester as to what they want this amendment, why they want this amendment, sorry. Therefore, can you answer the following? 1, why the municipality wants this amendment? 2, who has proposed this and why? 3, did this arise after a request was made by a local developer or other? 4, why do you want to convert Chester into a bedroom community? 5, do you believe that the few shops in the village of Chester are unlikely to survive in the future? And 6, do you think the attraction of the village of Chester will be lost if this amendment is passed? As I see things, I believe you will ultimately destroy the historic village of Chester if this amendment is passed, and in doing, simply fill the pockets of a property developer. However, I look forward to hearing from you as perhaps you may allay some of my concerns. I appreciate if you would also answer my questions 1 to 6 above. Can you also please tell me what are the next stages involved for considering this possible amendment? And what is your timescale for this? We have another one from MJ Boyd. As Village of Chester residents, my wife and I are concerned about the proposed amendment to permit residential uses of 5 to 10 dwelling units per structure within the central commercial zone by development agreement. We fully agree with the questions and concerns raised by Vpac and oppose this amendment moving forward unless municipal council can fully answer the questions and satisfactorily address the concerns. If municipal council attempts to answer the questions and address these concerns during the Thursday hearing and still intends to move forward on the amendment, it should hold a follow-up public meeting before doing so. And the questions he listed were, well, where will the water come from to support these units? Turning the commercial district into residential dwellings will wipe out the commercial area of the village, and we could become a bedroom community with no commercial services. Parking implications, waste management, sewer impact, lack of municipal water impacts and impedes the efficacy of firefighting. As witnessed this past summer, denser residential population in the commercial zone poses a real threat. There are no infrastructure improvements tabled to support this kind of development initiative, and a sudden increase in population density will severely impact the existing delicate balance of an already threatened water table and sewer waste management system, as well as set a dangerous precedent for density on other properties. Why does council feel there is a need to expand the allowances when there's been no demand under existing rules? If this is in response to an isolated case, why not deal with it on its own as opposed to making a wholesale change for the entire downtown core? This issue should be sent to a plan review, not addressed as a one-time change. We don't need to open the floodgates to property developers and wind up altering the delicate balance of quality of life that the current infrastructure is already struggling to support. And then, so this is, I'm not sure who this one's from. Oh, this is from Karen Flynn.
Yeah.
We are property owners on Queen Street.
Guy Skipwood.
Sorry?
There's two names on that, Aaron Flynn and Guy Skipwood.
Oh, Guy Skipworth, yes, 2 names. We are property owners on Queen Street in Chester and would like council to consider our thoughts on the proposed development changes. It appears the two main objectives of this proposal are to eliminate some existing uncertainty about larger developments, thereby removing some of the discretionary decision-making and to increase needed housing stock. The proposal should not be approved at this time as council nor residents have enough information to understand the impact of this decision. The impact this decision will have and whether the proposal will achieve the goals of council. There is no assessment in the report of how many units might be built in total over a specific time period. Without this assessment, how can council know if the changes will increase housing stock? There is no mention of what kind of housing stock is required and whether the proposed changes will result in the right kind of stock. There is no assessment of impact on the water table. Over the last few years, dating back to at least 2016, the municipality has spent money to provide residents with water due to dry wells. In the 2017 report to council, VOC Central Water System Needs Assessment, 25% of the respondents reported shortages of water. The report also stated existing climate models suggest the rate and frequency of extreme weather events is increasing in Nova Scotia, which would indicate that drought events such as those experienced in 2016 are likely to be repeated. And as we know, more residents had to rely on bottled water last summer. What was the cost to the municipality for the water relief program last year? And what is budgeted for the future? Implications, finance, and A. It's difficult to understand how the staff report and can suggest that the proposed changes have no impact on the finances of the municipality. If there is not an analysis of how many units might be built in the village, how can council estimate the impact on the water table and resulting costs for water relief? Further, the report states that individual applications in the future could be subject to confirmation of adequate groundwater. What is the criteria to determine if there is adequate groundwater? It appears that discretion and uncertainty will continue under the new proposed planning rules. Strategic plan. Part of the municipality's strategic plan states the village to be a choice for residences, businesses, and organizations and an international tourist destination. If the water table is impacted and wells are dry, how do retail businesses like the Roadblock Vauxhall, Chester's, and Kiwi Cafe continue to operate and attract tourists, if their costs to pay for water are going to increase substantially. Who will want to buy a property in the village if wells are dry? How will the municipality maintain services if property values decrease? Arbitrary, why 10 units? Why not 8 or 12? It appears that one applicant asked for 10, so council decided 10 is the right number. Is it? Conclusion, the goals of the proposed changes may make sense. However, residents and council do not have enough information to make a rational decision. And then we have a couple, or one more that came in today. I think it came in, or yesterday, sorry. So this is from Francine Gingras. I submitted a letter yesterday, but wonder if there is room for, if there's a Zoom link for this very important meeting taking place tomorrow morning. It seems to me that these decisions are being done in silos and without the critical thinking necessary before you finalize anything. In fact, I've never seen the Chester Village secondary planning strategy or understand who and how this came about. At a minimum, you should be reaching out to all homeowners who pay taxes in the village to get 360 response and participation. If it wasn't for Vpac, we would never know of any of these critical issues. I look forward to hearing from you. And I believe, Pam's on the line, I believe that they were contacted and told how to watch the meeting today.
Yeah.
There's one more, Dudley Grove.
Oh, yes, there is.
This one?
Yeah, Dudley Grove, yeah.
Oh, there we go. I was thinking it's the same one. So Pam, would you please pass on our thoughts? We do not support this move to add multi-unit development at this time. Before this should be considered, a full plan for the village should be developed and not spot development. Also, there are questions about water, sewer, traffic, and quality of life that should be explored and answered. Why not have a requirement that units look like existing Chester houses with 2 or 3 units included in a house? Why, we would not like to see a string of cookie cutter units. Also, would this encourage year-round living in Chester or be a block of blacked out unoccupied units in the winter? It seems that critical issues are always raised in the winter when the fewest people are available to participate in discussions. It is unfortunate that the village leadership does not wish to involve the whole community in such critical decisions, so we move forward together. Thanks, Jim and Dudley Grove.
Just before we maybe move along, I wonder, Gareth, if you could explain to council the types of, when someone applies for a development agreement, there are a lot of questions that have to be answered and addressed.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
we have a set of policy statements in the secondary planning strategy that basically the way the policy reads is that council must be satisfied of the following, and then there's many policy statements there, and they cover a wide variety of issues, which some have been touched upon this morning: water,
So
pedestrian access, ability to serve with sewer either on site or municipal, adequacy of water, and a variety, traffic, parking, kind of many of the things we look at in any development. Sort of to some of the comments that were received, and it's intentional, part of that development agreement gives some flexibility, and that council is able to essentially negotiate with the property owner or the developer. So there's not necessarily a rigid benchmark of what something will meet. And obviously we've heard that that's some of the concern. But yes, you're right.
But all of those, for the most part, every concern that's been raised is part of the development agreement process.
Right, yes, that's right. Virtually everything I think that I've heard in the submissions would be something that would be considered part of that land use, and so could be or would be controlled through that development.
Through that process.
Yeah.
Okay, Derek, you had a question.
Yeah, a couple. And you gave the letters or read the letters. One document I have that you apparently don't have, which I'd like to put into the record if I may, and I'm not sure the process of doing that, but in the correspondence that I have over the last 48 hours, I thought you had it all as well. This was one that came from Montana. And it was a list of responses to the land use bylaw survey. And there are a number of other comments from other people in this document that I'd like to be part of the record. These are people clearly that were opposed. I'm not sure the proper way to present this information, but it's something that came to me in an email.
Yeah.
I think through my municipal site now that I learned that. I use it.
We'll just add it to public record and give it to,
I'll make sure it gets into the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get that to her, but it's just other people that have raised concerns. Nothing new as far as content is concerned, but.
Just more.
I think these people should be part of the record as to being posed. I got one more question for Garth from
I'm
this.
just gonna ask that. Maybe it should be copied as part of our other papers that we received on our desk.
Yeah.
Pre the agenda item 7.2 or wherever, whenever we're dealing with this, I'm just throwing that out there.
yeah, we can have a copy. It's not a problem.
Garth, the warden was asking you questions about addressing the concerns of water and parking and the development agreement. And I think in your report, whole section where you address development agreements, I think starting perhaps on page 4 of your report.
Yes.
You mentioned, and I'm going to go, I just go back to one of the letters that came in. One of the letters that was read into the record stated that while development agreements may be useful in planning, they have a dark and greatly abused past. Do you have any sense of what the greatly abused past has been, development agreements?
Only what I can infer. I began my time here in 2014, and the current plan, which has virtually done away with development agreements, was adopted in 2004. There is some language in the current plan that speaks to why the plan has moved away from development agreements. It doesn't give specific examples, as in this particular property on the corner of 2 streets. What it speaks to in the plan is mostly about on the periphery of a commercial zone, there had been the ability to develop commercial uses through a development agreement, but in a residentially zoned area. That's what the plan seems to refer to as the concerns of the past. I've also taken a look at some of our older development agreements, some of which are still in place, but are no longer being used for the purpose that the development agreement was for. So some of them, let's say they were for a commercial use, it just looks like a house today because it's just being used as a residence. So I took a look through some of those in the lead up to this meeting. And again, it's all inference because but from what I understand, Chandler's Cove was certainly a development agreement that created a large amount of concern and outcry. And then there are a few others, and I don't want to pick any because I'm not sure, but there's a few others that were in and along the Highway 3 area where at least a portion of the property had been zoned residential, and through a development agreement, a commercial use was done. Many of those uses are things that we are very familiar with now when we drive down from Robinson's Corner. So it's some of sort of the staple uses that are out there now, but so I don't, anyway, I just want to be careful as to what I speak to because I don't know, other than Chambers Cove, that's one that I've been speaking with village residents. I've heard them mention there was a meeting at the school and it was discussing development agreements and there was a large turnout. So that's the one.
Yeah. Chandler's Cove would have been the biggest one, and you're referring to the change from residential to commercial, which is just the opposite of what's being said today, but whatever. There was nothing
Can I
specific.
continue?
Very good.
Sure. In your report, you say that, talking about public, the community wants a high level of certainty. And you go, it said the proposed amendments do not seek to return to past practices. And that's what you're referring to as the adjoining properties.
In part, and also just that these proposed amendments are focused only on one zone. So what we're not proposing is that 5 to 10 residential units are considered in any zone across the entire planning area. It's limited to those yellow properties. So that was what I meant by that comment. So we're not returning to an era where development agreements were used for all types of uses in all types of zones, and it was more of a wide open ability to just apply for any sort of
So
use.
these development agreements that you're referring to in this would be not on the same scale as the ones in the past.
Scale in terms of their breadth, not necessarily in terms of the intensity of the use itself. Scale as in terms of how widespread they are, or for what types of, so what we're proposing to introduce here is 5 to 10 residential units in a structure in a specific zone.
No other use.
No other uses by development agreement. So that was what I meant by we're not returning to a broad-based use of development agreements for all kinds of purposes. And that was, as I mentioned earlier, the discussion that council had around the table was that this may serve as a test case because council sees the benefit and value of development agreements and thinks that they could be useful going forward in the village plan review. And so what we're doing, what we're considering right now is a small incremental change to return to the use of development agreements in a specific zone for a specific use.
In a limited way.
In a limited way, and that may give us some, may be helpful as we move forward in the plan review to see how it worked or how it didn't work, and do we want to look at any expansions or not.
How many development agreements do we have in practice right now in the village?
So we have 27 on file, but many of those have been discharged and several have been withdrawn. Those aren't all within the village either, so some of those are municipally. So
Speaking now of the village particularly.
Yeah, I don't have that number. It's near 10 or 12, and some of them are to infill a portion of Back Harbor or to build a wharf that's more than 12 feet wide. Several of the ones that are still in effect. There's several, like I mentioned, that are still in effect, but like we could. It's actually something. Just a little aside that staff are looking at. We at some point should do a review of those and follow up and see if the property owners still wish to have them. But anyway, I don't have a hard number for you. It's a fairly low number.
I thought your section on development agreements was well written, and I thank you for that. I think we covered many, or if not all, of the issues that were raised with respect to the water, parking, those types of issues, which are always going to be an issue here. But those will be addressed in the development agreement.
Yes.
Based on what you're saying in your report. That's it for the moment. I need these things on the record just because it's a big decision for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Nice to decide what we're going to do here. I'm trying to get all the information.
So can I open it up to anyone else who has a question at this point? Okay, so I don't know if you want to go back up to committee reports and minutes, or if you just want to deal with this issue. We're on 7.2 really, because that's where Susie.
Well,
Do you want that?
might well make it there, but the people here.
Well, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to decide what we're going to do.
Hey, before we do that, I want to get one other concern that's been expressed. And this was in many of the presentations that came in by letter, was what people perceive as the lack of public consultation. And again, I wasn't here for the public consultation, and I'd like to know exactly why this concern is out there. Why do people feel they were blindsided by this proposal? So get into that a little bit.
What I can speak to is our process. I can't speak to why people feel that they
No, understood.
understand.
I understand.
Here, yeah. So what I can say is this file followed our standard public engagement process, as all of our planning amendment files do. What I can also tell you is we frequently hear that people have not heard about things. It happened during our municipal plan. It happens virtually every time, unfortunately, and it's a constant struggle. That's not to say there isn't more that we could look into, but I don't think you'll ever satisfy everyone. But so what we do is and in this case, this initiated from the request from Mr. Uden for 122 Queen Street. So that was initially heard at council. We brought a staff report back to council, and those meetings are not advertised in any particular way, just like a standard council meeting. So it was at council twice. And then it went, we got direction from council to look at development agreements and bring that to the village planning advisory committee. So we held a public information meeting, is usually sort of the first step. It's advertised in the newspaper, on our municipal website, and posted on our municipal office doors here. And that's done basically at least 5 days before the date of the meeting. So that was advertised and held. I'd have to look back and tell you the exact date of that meeting. I'm not sure if I have the report here. But we had a small turnout, which is not uncommon for those public information meetings. The file then went to the Village Planning Advisory Committee. And similarly, there's the same advertising basically is done for that meeting. The committee met and discussed it and passed the motion that was discussed here. And then the next step was to bring it back to council for first reading. So there was no specific advertising done around first reading, because again, that's just a regular council session. And then at first reading, council gave it first reading and set the dates for the public hearing. And then the public hearing has some sort of special advertising requirements. So it needs to, the ad in the newspaper needs to run 2 consecutive weeks prior to the date of the hearing. And the first advertisement has to be placed 14 clear days before the date of the public hearing. And then similarly, we posted on the municipal website, and the municipal office doors. We send, in this case, a notification to any affected villages. So we sent it to the village commission, of course. And then there's a few things that we didn't do in this case, and it's because our process did not call for them. So just to touch on those, there is, if the changes would potentially have an impact on an adjacent municipality, we would notify them. So if it was a change, say in Western Shore, we would definitely notify the district of Lunenburg. Typically what we do, if it's anything on the municipal side, we notify all of our neighbors. So we send it to HRM, West Hants, and Modal. But in this case, because it was a village amendment,
Didn't
we
border on
notified the
any of
village
it.
commission. The other piece, and I know a few of the folks that I spoke to asked about this too. In our procedure, if the amendment is general in nature, and that is it affects the entire area equally, then this is the process we go through. If the amendment is specific in nature to a particular property, then we do a neighbor notification package that we send to all neighboring property owners that are within 30 meters or about 100 feet of a property boundary. So we draw a circle and include anybody whose property even touches within that circle gets a letter and a notification package in advance of the public hearing to basically a specific mail out to them. So this didn't happen in this case because the change is specific to the entire commercial zone. There was no requirement to do a notification package. If and when this goes ahead, and then there is a development agreement received, a request for a development agreement for 122 Queen Street,
Then
that's specific to the property, so everybody within 30 meters of 122 Queen Street will get a mail out before the public hearing for that development agreement. So I think that's it. I know that was a lot, so if you have any questions on that, yeah.
No, I know, I'm not all out to need to know why this concern is out there. Has there been ever consideration given when we do have these amendments to sending out something in a flyer format to all property owners?
I don't think so.
Is that
Those just
something we ever done or would be able to consider at some point going forward?
Council in the past did have a public engagement. There was a project that was looking into reviewing our public engagement.
So when we did the municipal plan review, there was several, we did a couple of newsletters and general mailouts. Because, so we have the 2 planning strategies, we have and land use bylaws, we have one for the whole municipality and one for the village. So if we did it for the village, council would probably want to consider doing that for the municipality, and then you'd be looking at potentially mail outs to everybody in the whole municipality. So it's not something we've ever done in the past. We have in the past done things like, and this is normally we do them when they're larger, like our whole plan review and stuff like that. We'll notice at the grocery store or at sometimes we'll post posters at the pharmacies and the post office and different places, but not by practice. Generally, it's usually, yeah.
Those are for
Usually
for major projects where that was discussed with council up front, and we said, we want to, so for example, as Sarah said, the plan review, we posted 100 plus posters all across the municipality, but that's not part of the standard public engagement practice.
I think we need to review the public engagement practice, and I just table that, and that's the correct terms around this table, but That is one of the major concerns expressed.
Yeah.
I think in this case, that happened last week, people would have been, the letter would have come in. I think however the word got out, we have gotten the input. I think going forward, I think I'd like to be more proactive. And I can do that, perhaps as the counselor, to make sure that people are engaged, because this is a major issue for people. And we owe it to them to take the time to address all the issues that they raised. You know, many of the concerns that I have, Mr. Ward, if I can just speak for a moment, have been addressed in the sense that I will raise the issue of public consultation going forward, but I think in this case, you know, what happened is just a highlight that we may have to do better going forward. One of the other particular questions that I was concerned about is why not just this particular property? And I think you addressed that in your report, and I think it's been addressed by other councilors here. And the issue of the amendments that have to be made in spot zoning, it's not something that is generally seen as a good planning practice, and I don't dispute that. The concerns raised by Vpac and others, the water, the density, and you know, can't that you already satisfied that you address that in your report on the development agreement, and all these things would be considered. I'm not going to go ahead and Councilor Bino address that in his remarks. You address the issue of the village plan review, and you know, I think may have to delve into that a little further, but being a question that was raised, I think it's been addressed. The big one, of course, the elephant in the room always has been development agreements. We know there are some people that don't like development agreements. But, I think because these are limited, they're not going back to maybe a more wide open process. And I think the limits that are proposed for these development agreements going forward, as council has said, gives us that tool, and it is a tool used elsewhere. It's not it doesn't have a dark past in my view. Maybe mistakes have been made, but I think we can learn from those. We have the Chandler Cove as a prime example of a wonderful development done for development agreement that may not have happened otherwise. So I think that's a good tool to have. And you know, whatever council has a chance to address, I'm prepared to make a motion on the issue.
Thank you. Andre.
Well, the only thing I was at the time, Councilor Wells had explained many ideas, but at the time.
I did him all I could.
No, I would say that, you know, in terms of public engagement, there's room for opportunity. I find that as a municipality, we put a lot of information out there, a lot. And maybe if there are items such as this, which would be of interest to certain residents, it gets lost because we do put so much out. And then when another group comes forward and picks up on it and they decide to use their megaphone, maybe they don't put a lot of information out. So when they do, people take notice.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, I find in this particular case, I think some of the information that were put forward by this other group actually wasn't accurate.
Wasn't entirely.
Well, it didn't really paint the picture of what we're trying to do here. And it kind of left folks with the impression that this was going to be an opportunity for developers to come in and just make bang in Chester by putting on 10-unit buildings all over the place. And that's simply not the case. And even if a proposal were to come out, that we would go through an engagement process where we actually would be notifying directly
Jason
to people and not putting it through our channels, our usual communication channels. We would actually be speaking with individuals. So I think the threat of being sort of surprised by a development that's grotesque, yeah, or somehow damages the character of our village, I think is not really there. and the other infrastructure concerns and stuff like that, they would all be addressed at that time. So that's when I read that other correspondence from the other group, they really focused on this specter that's what that could happen, and that's simply not what's on the table. What's on the table is allowing our planners one more tool to deal with these unusual requests, that it allows sort of an escape hatch that they can actually take those matters to council and we can deal with them. And that's all this is. And I just, as Derek says, I just want that on the record.
Okay, Gina?
Thank you. Dark, I absolutely appreciate you walking us through again with Councillor Wells' question around the process, our process, the steps forward, sort of the steps that we took and so on. So I guess we're just kind of repeating ourselves a bit, but like you, Derek, as part of my own reflection and deliberation and rethinking and rehashing and rereading for the last couple of days, 48 hours probably. And I think what spurred it on was Ms. Chaplain Saunders' correspondence around her Facebook and social media. I'm not even aware. So then that really kind of got me, maybe a bee in my bonnet a little bit. And I look back to when the developer, the presentation first took place, and that was April 22nd. So again, I looked at it. So again, when they came in and then we went through. So it's been a happy, it's been
Almost a year.
yeah, almost a year. So in terms of, people, their own due diligence, I guess, and I know it's come up in my community around the feedback that I got with the 2 public meetings we had around the municipal plan review. We provided the direct flyers, we provided over and over and over, posters at every location. And so it's, you bring it on to yourself a bit in terms of self-education around the public input piece is all I'm going to say. So, but that was part of me, my own thinking, my own working this through. And like you, I'll wait till we really officially get this on the agenda, But that for me,
It's on the agenda now.
yeah, it is. And we people have to read this. I was in the New Ross Post Office yesterday and I was so upset to see our municipal newsletter. Just, go to the box.
And throw the garbage.
In the
in,
garbage.
take a look at it.
So again, it's all you can do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I remember knocking on doors and people saying, well, we never hear from you, and I'll see you in their garbage can and municipal newsletter as well. Maybe you could have read that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's legitimate, that for whatever reason, people didn't know, and we have a responsibility to make
do our
those
best.
extra efforts to get it out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think we demean them in any way for not having read our website. I don't even know if I knew you had a website before you liked it. Well, that's an exaggeration. Sorry, I didn't know that, but you know what I mean? I didn't go home every night, look at your website, see what you're doing, right? So,
People generally don't, unless something impacts them directly, they don't pay much attention.
The one thing I'll say to that is that in this case, for example, this is a policy change to a bylaw that we do this often, sometimes they're minor. So determining when people are going to be interested, that's a very challenging thing to do. The actual thing that would, like, if you look at most of the correspondence that deals with all these infrastructure concerns or aesthetics,
Which will be dealt with.
that in that case, we actually do reach directly and touch these people and say, come and talk and let's talk about this. But in this case, it's just a policy change that we do many of those. And sometimes they're housekeeping amendments where we're just changing a few words and like, how do you know when we should reach out?
Proof will be included going forward, both on the reach to the community and how we deal with our first request for development agreement. I think proof will be the pudding. I think we have to prove that we are listening and that we will put the safeguards in place so that we don't lose the character. I think we're all aware of that, but I think it's been brought to our attention some more that when we get to that point, if we do get to that point, want to take care and engage the community, and I think we'll all make sure that happens, right, Tina?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Floyd.
I agree with, no matter what we try, it seems that people always have the excuse that they didn't see it, we didn't know how to fix it, but I was wondering, this particular case, was the village commission informed and they were well aware of it.
Yeah, so they got a specific notice of the public hearing, that went out basically at the same time the advertisements were.
But I think, and I'm saying that for a reason, I think some of the responsibility maybe, you know, they're aware of it and they represent the village, so.
I don't want to put responsibility on the village commission. I think it's our responsibility.
Well, I think.
We followed our policy and we did all those things that we were expected to do.
I think that's exactly what I was going to say. We've done our part. I think we should do it every meeting. We put it publicly, it's been 6, 8, 9 months.
I don't disagree, we just have to do better.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
Let's deal with it.
Well, that's what I want to, yeah, like, we're either going to approve the amendment.
You know, I'm gonna make a motion. That'd be appropriate.
Yes.
For a motion.
Yeah.
You know, all the discussion has been had, I won't put any preamble, I simply make a motion that we approve the amendment.
Second that motion.
Discussion on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So that's all we need to do. It's done.
Yes, we will send it off to the province, which is part of the process from here, and then basically, what will happen is we'll hear back from the province that everything is good with them. We put an advertisement in the paper, it's called the notice of amendment, and when that ad goes in the paper, it becomes effective.
Yeah.
So that, yeah. that's from here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Planning and land use policy is not a simple matter. Minutes of the previous meeting, council December 9th.
Second that motion.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, Lunenburg County Senior Safety. Tina, is that?
Thank you. What can I say? No. No. It's been included in your package. They will be coming in, as well as one of our annual presentations that we receive at times from groups and partners and stakeholders and the like. So just wanted to get better at sharing that in the council package each month. And I think with Pam, we're doing that. So thank you. If there's any questions. Perfect.
Anyone? Thank you. Okay, mayors and wards, I know you don't have this in front of us, but we met on November the 24th at Kaiser Meadow. I can say that we had a lot of presentations, and they took a lot longer than people expected. So we didn't get into any decisions of any kind whatsoever on anything, quite frankly. But we did have a presentation by Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, South Shore. And really, that was just an information session on what they're out there doing. They had no requests specifically from councils or individually or collectively. They just want to know what they were, us to know that they were out there, and that if we got a request from them, we'd understand where it's coming from.
So who are they? Regional Entrepreneurship, so sure.
Yeah, they're just out promoting the development across the region.
Who's they? Sorry.
I know a little bit about this, I'm following this.
Mark Whitfield and Brianna Higgins made the presentation.
Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, it's part of
Okay,
the
yeah.
one Nova Scotia report. There was a
Yeah.
bunch of subcommittees created, and this is one of
Okay.
them. And they sort of formed a group. It's-
That are taking the local ways to promote.
In my view, pretty much everybody from on the group is Bridgewater area.
Yeah.
It doesn't really
Okay.
resonate with me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But, you know, we may hear from them.
And I think if you, I believe it's a website, so if you put in regional, MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, you'd be able to see it. And I believe to Councilor Vito's point, it lists the name of I understand the volunteers
Yeah, yeah.
that are on a committee
Yeah.
looking at acceleration of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Well, I can reach out to Mark, I know him quite well, so he's away with him.
Yeah, and then the second one was coordinated access system. Lisa Ryan's presentation on the history and rationale for establishing coordinated access in Lunenburg County. It was noted that Energize Bridgewater is committed to provide approximately $200,000 in startup funding to establish the initiative, and Lisa advocated for the participation of all municipal units in the county after this funding was utilized. But again, it's been on the agenda several times. There was no decision made. Staff are still looking at how we may work together. I don't know what else to tell you. And we had a third presentation, was Anti-Racism Task Force. Professor Watson made a presentation regarding the work of the Bridgewater Anti-Racism Task Force and advocated for the establishment of a regional committee and shared position to support anti-racism action in Lunenburg County. And we've talked about this on numerous occasions, and staff are still working on the way in which we can coordinate that, because I think all of us in general agree that one group, one policy, one process across the county would be the best idea. There was a little bit of discussion, there was no conclusion reached on it only being associated with anti-racism and not inclusion and diversity. So I think that's still a bit of a discussion that needs to be had, because some believe it should be very specific and some think it should be broader based. But again, that's with staff. District of Chester was going to do a sustained presentation, but like I said when we started, these things took so long that we didn't get to that. And also it was snowing that day, so most people had to be back at other meetings and they were in a hurry to get going, so we didn't end up doing it. Regional short-term rental regulations, I think that we just had a very basic discussion that it's still a good idea if we could come up with some kind of a policy across the region. Regional housing discussion, Town of Mahone Bay, I don't quite remember what, I don't think we got into that, no. From regional transit, we didn't get into that because we just ran out of time. And then Chester's the host of the next meeting. So it's, yeah, the presentations took so long and started to snow so much that people just wanted to get out.
We don't have any material on what you're talking about, do we, in our package?
We do not.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Stop looking.
Alan, was Peter there to do a presentation?
Well, he was, yes, but, and they had, we held a meeting out there in this facility. And the facility was operational that day, but we just ran out of time and just couldn't do it. And he understood.
Yeah, I saw his name there, that's why I asked him.
Oh, no, he was there, yeah. Yeah, they mingled amongst people, but they never got the opportunity to do the presentation, we didn't get the opportunity to do the tour. But they were ready for it all. Okay, so public presentations regarding. Do we have any?
Just the ones I already.
Yeah, I already did, yeah. Okay, let's do 7.1, then uniform signage update.
Yeah, I'm back with uniform signage. Me again.
Well, we're making some progress.
Okay, so yeah, so the bylaw, we did second reading on October 14th. Now reading municipal affairs for review and approval. So once the bylaw is approved by them, then it'll appear in the paper giving notice that the bylaw is in effect. Once the bylaw is in effect, staff can begin the implementation process. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the implementation plan going forward. Again, like we spoke with the spring 2020 rollout. Just a reminder that it's a pilot program on Exit 6 Highway 3. Staff conducted a site visit spring 2020 and compiled a list of the existing signs and contacted those owners via letter mail regarding the upcoming bylaw and the program and what to expect when it rolls out.
I just want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few new signs installed there since the spring, and some of them are really big and 4x4 posts, so maybe an idea to take another look.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, when the time comes, staff will go out again and make another list and send out more letters. So yeah, I'll just kind of go through all the implementation process. So the application process has been reviewed by staff and it's ready for administration. The responsibilities of the registrar of the bylaw includes issuing, refusing, or revoking permission to install the uniform signage. So the development and planning technician is designated to this role. So she'll handle application submissions and any program related inquiries from business owners. If you scroll down, you can see the map of the sign locations that we did. So staff conducted a site visit in the fall. And we GPS each potential sign location. So there's 13 little stars there. And just to note, the staff will need to apply for a work within the TIR right away before beginning each install of each sign. So yeah, there's 13 signs there. I think 5 staff members from each department that was needed. We went and did sort of an assessment regarding like ditch size and elevation, ability to install the chemicals for our sign structures, distance from intersections, following the bylaw requirements, visibility and distance from homes, and then sightlines for residents. All those, I included some photos from our site visit, just for you to enjoy. Nick was very excited to GPS. And again, the next photo is just the sign structure example that we've shown in previous reports. So to include the municipal logo on the half moon that was discussed internally and sought to be the most visually appealing option. So each sign structure will have the half moon with the municipal logo on it. Again, like I said, it's anticipated to roll out for the spring of 2020. We anticipate an initial installation of 2 sign structures each direction from that intersection there. And then we'll also have 2 other sign structures ordered and waiting to be installed. So to build a little bit of momentum for the program, we anticipate to have initial signs to have advertising sort of saying, if you want your business name here, please call, and we'll put an office number. Once staff start to accept applications, we'll have a good sense of the demand, and staff can order signs as needed as the requests come in. So like I've said, letters to the business owners can be sent out once this timeline is established, and this will enable municipal affairs approval. However, the signs will contact those business owners. The bylaw says a minimum of 14 days, but again, like I've said in previous presentations, we'll work with the business and we'll have lots of time. So realistically, the removal of the illegal signs and the new installation of signs will happen relatively close in time, so businesses have optimal advertising. And yeah, so staff recommends this happen early spring, just right after the fall, so we can get it rolling.
It'd be nice to see it.
I know.
Certainly would.
I know. Yeah, so we've got the 2 options there. You can direct staff. Option 1, direct staff to proceed with the uniform signage implementation. And then the second option is to suggest any changes if you see any that need to be.
I think we want you to do number 1.
I would guess.
Do we? Let's make that a motion, please.
So, option 1.
Second, discussion of those in favor. All right.
Do we anticipate any delay, I guess, from the minister again, or?
I hope not. It's on their radar and they know that we want it moving.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that we could start. What
I
are we
just wanna ask
stopping?
another question if I could. I see all the blue dots.
Yeah,
There are different sites where you can put signs, you put the same.
yeah.
Okay. But you're gonna put like on one sign that would have 4 or 5 different businesses. I really think you're gonna have a maximum, I would think, 10 requests.
Well, so, yeah, so like I said, we'll start with the initial 2 first on the other side of that road. So we'll have the 2 sign structures installed, and as the applications come in, we'll fill up those. So if we don't get enough applications, there won't be empty structures waiting.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just really wanted to have an idea of where the signs could go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Before,
we
yeah.
knew how many signs we would be able to fit in there and how many plates we would be able to.
Yeah.
apply.
Yeah, when I looked at the signage that was there, probably 60% of them weren't tourist related. So, and then when you break it down, there's probably only 5 or 6 or 7 at the most going one way, and then there was the other way, even less. So I don't think the uptake on is going to be huge.
Yeah, perhaps. So there might be other businesses that this triggers them to want to have signs.
But it is going to be restricted to tourists.
Tourism businesses.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any objection if we move on to 9.2 so Sylvia can leave?
Yes.
Sylvia, come on.
Thanks. The new private roadway request for for a right of way that will give access to 3 residential dwellings. Property owners have proposed the name Scott Cove Living. It is unique, it will be unique in the province. The only concern is that it sounds like Scotch Cove Road, the road that it's accessed from. The fire chief has submitted the following comment. If I get glasses, don't fall out, I can read it. I relate this to Walker Road and Walker Cut in the back part of it. Historically, they caused confusion, which modern mapping has helped curb. No major concerns, but there's always potential for confusion and road arrival. One option to consider is a road prefix to help alleviate that, but the property owners have requested Scotch Cove Lane.
Anybody have an issue with that?
Is that a concern enough not to approve it?
It's an option. You can consider road prefix to help alleviate the fire chief's concern that it may be confused with Scotch Cove Road. We could approve Scotch Cove Lane. It is unique to the province.
What do you want to do?
On the area.
What do you want to do on it?
I don't really comment.
So you want to make a motion?
We'll move to.
Second, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Can we take a 10-minute break? Regarding the presentation of November 10th, council meeting regarding Saddle Island noise. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on it or if it's simply for our information.
Well, I'm gonna comment on it, but I think it's nice to see 2 sides to a story, because there always is 2 sides.
3 sides.
Well, yeah, there's 2, 3, or 4, but I've gone down there on numerous occasions and tried to listen to hear the noises, and I failed to do it. I sit alongside the road, so, and it's nice to see that they reached out to the local people there and they contact with them and trying to resolve it, so, yeah, I just shouldn't keep
Anybody else?
Just for clarification. Is there a community liaison group with this? I know that somebody mentioned that they were part of the liaison group with some of the other sort of issues around the municipality.
I know we've suggested that they have one. I don't know that they do.
It says we have established
Yeah.
community
Oh,
liaison
they
committees
do
in the
now.
communities where we operate, and we would welcome a representative from the municipality of Chester on the Saddle Island CLC. So,
Yeah, okay, that's where I read.
There's a job
But
for you.
I've already spoken with these folks and I've offered to participate. But they need to take steps to actually set it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, I'll do.
Then
what I
we'll
can.
appoint you.
Well, whatever,
Right.
I'd be happy to go regardless, and just, we need them to do it, not just this letter.
Can you formalize that somehow?
Tara?
I've spoken to them, so I was going to send them a letter. Council had asked for a letter to be
Yes.
sent, and I spoke with them. And they indicated that they had spoken to Councilor Vino. And so they said they knew that there was interest in it, but in talking to some of the residents, they haven't had any uptake on the committee. So what I suggested was that they send this letter and then we would have conversations. So I can send them a formal request to
Ask them
give us.
to, yes, if they would at least establish the committee and the number of people, then maybe we could encourage people to participate. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, if people are going to, I don't want to use the word complain, but raise concerns. If we can refer them to a committee that they may be able to have direct input, I think that's healthy.
This is what we've been advocating for.
For quite a while.
I directly been advocating for with this company. I point to a success story in Louisiana, Pacific, LP, Maybach, whatever. They've been operating for many years. There's many issues that have arose, environmental issues and stuff like that, but they've been able to through their community, eventually, get to a place where I think in general, the community is satisfied with that. Every once in a while, they have a sensor malfunction and there's some soot on people's cars, but in general, people are happy and they have a mechanism by which they're aware of to provide feedback.
Yeah.
And that's what we need here.
Yeah, so Tara will write them and ask them to formally establish a committee. See what happens. Okay, 9.1, community development recreation appointment of building official, Jim Holt.
So move.
Seconder,
Second, that's easy.
discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried, glad it's done, glad we had somebody to appoint.
We start today.
I don't know.
Said they've already started, but they aren't able to carry out any official inspections until they're appointed, so they're just doing orientation and training up until this point.
But now they can tomorrow.
We all know the real concern about the delays, so
Yeah.
the sooner we get going, the better.
Yeah. Okay, 9.3, requests financial information service update on private street improvement bylaw number 72. Just read the thing. It's simple.
Yeah, that last one went real quick. Walking downstairs, and okay, I'm next. I'll be quiet. So yeah, I got a couple things for you this morning. The first is a request for some direction before we go in and do some work amending bylaw 72 for the private roads maintenance and improvements. In particular, this is a follow-up on some of the discussion around administration fee. So I'll be looking for some direction on that. As well as just to give you a heads up on some of the other things we're looking at amending and give you an opportunity to provide any direction that you feel we should take before we start to work to modify the wording of the bylaw. So with the administration fee right now, we charge a flat 10% of the budgets that are submitted to us. That leads to some of the larger road associations paying upwards of $2,000 a year out of their budget for that. So we're looking at revising that to include likely a smaller percentage, as well as a hard cap for a maximum amount for each association. I would recommend we go with 5% and max of $1,000 per association per year. However, we'd be happy to receive direction as to how you would like.
Well, that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, 5% is pretty consistent with what the other municipalities around the province that we've talked to use. I'm not aware of anyone specifically using a cap, but I know there was some direction earlier that we could be interested in doing that, so.
Are we all right with that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Let's say I have a road with 6 residents, or I have a road with 40. Is there a lot of extra work in the administration of the one, or is it pretty much, is it scalable? Is it directly proportional to the number of residents?
It's not directly, although I would say that the larger ones do tend to create more work than the smaller ones. It's not as direct. It's not like if you have 10 residents versus 20, it's going to be twice as much work. But because of the interaction of more people creates more issues that they might have to raise with us, or that we might have to address.
So you're spending more
complicated,
time.
larger budgets that we have to review and spend some more time dealing with specifics. So not directly scalable, but there is some relationship there, yes.
No, thank you. No, that's definitely an improvement. I guess the only problem I have with it, and I don't know how to fix it, I don't think, but it seems like we're charging for the amount of money, almost like an interest versus the amount of work. Because, for example, if I live on a road with 25 residents and we want $3,000 a year, we're going to pay 5%, $150. If 100 lives on a road with 25 residents, they decide they want a higher standard, so they go over $25,000 a year. They're going to pay $1,500 versus $150. It just doesn't seem fair to me because I don't see the administration costs being any different for the same amount of residents. That's where I'll be honest with you. That's what brought to my attention with it. I do like 5%, but I'm not sure the cap at 1,000 is low enough because, well, a lot of residents with 25 residents may pay $150 a year to use the service. Another resident with 25 residents may pay $1,000 a year. It just doesn't make sense to me, that formula. And if you capped it at 500, I think it would be easier to explain to people what we're trying to accomplish. I know we're trying to improve the pay people, and I understand that completely. But I just don't see, it almost seems like we're taxing the amount of money they're taking a loan versus taxing the service.
Well, I get a question. If we capped it at $500 and we charge 5%, would we actually generate enough revenue to pay for the cost of administration for ourselves?
So
Because I don't think
I've
other
done
people.
some rough analyses, and of course, it will depend on who else participates and what their budgets are. Based on the 5% with $1,000 cap, we would be bringing in about, I think it's just over $7,000 per year. Yeah, 7,042 based on this year's numbers. If we would revise that down to 500, that number drops to, I believe it's about 4,700. Which would, it doesn't cover the general cost.
Yeah.
I would also look at the fee is not it's not just for covering cost. It is, we are providing a service to private road owners, right?
Yeah.
To avoid having to chase their neighbors for collections and
Yeah, we're
all
going
that
to
stuff,
chase
right?
it.
So it's
We hire the contractors as well, right?
In some
In
cases.
some
for the
cases.
improvements, yes.
For the-
beyond
yes,
that.
that's right.
I think the majority of the situations that are participating right now are the ongoing maintenance. So it's really just their own budget gets submitted, we give them the money, they manage it.
Yep.
So it's mostly for assisting with, collections purposes, and just certainty over their funding. But also it is intended to cover, this is not a public service for everyone, these are private
No, it's for
roads.
those
So
who have
it is also intended to cover the costs. So it's kind of a two-part thing.
Okay.
Andre.
Okay. I live on a private road with only a few, and I've been thinking about this a bit. I don't have such a service at this point. I think the threat with the cap is that we may someday end up with maybe a really huge private road that's developed, and we may have hundreds of residents on there potentially, and then we have this really small capped value. That's a threat, and I don't know how to address that, because I also understand the issue that we have at Mount Marina Drive, where we don't have that situation, but a fairly high level of care that's required to maintain that road, and therefore it's impacting the residents. You almost need some sort of reasonable, because when it boils down to it, it's the number of residents that pay, and it'd be nice if there was a formula that directly related to the number of residents on the road rather than the actual administration budget. Or capped, or have the cap somehow tied to the number of residents. You know what I mean? That seems like it'd be a little smarter. I also think that whatever cap we decide on should be increased by CPI, because I think some future council will be looking back on a number, if it's 500 or 1,000 or whatever, and be like, well, how did they come up with this? This makes no sense, because
It doesn't even
it
cover
doesn't-
cost.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. So if we decide to do this, I think that we have to add that language in there as well.
CPI, yeah.
Yeah,
But the thing is too, it could be a road and you could have 3 residents at the beginning and it could be a very long road.
Well, that's
And
right. They're
And
all
one
fairly
person at the
different.
very end, it could be like a 2-kilometer road, I don't know, but.
I mean, I think that 12% of the $1,000 cap is by far a step in the right
So
direction.
don't get me wrong, the residents in that road are quite happy because it's gonna give them more funding and more work on the road. That's me talking about the fairness of it, it's not them talking. I'm quite confident that we're going from 10 to 5% will make them quite.
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, I think that the subject property that brought this concern, like, how many residents do you know of that are on there?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but
Do you have any sense of one of some of our longer roads? I don't have that right now.
there's probably 20 or more.
Yeah, I see.
I did look quickly at how many of our current roads associations would benefit from a cap at different levels. So at $1,000, using 5% estimate, at $1,000, about just under 20% of the current participants would hit that cap and therefore benefit from the cap. If we put it to 500, it would be a full 50% of participants would benefit from that. So basically half would be above 500, half would be below at a 5% rate.
Gary.
What happens if you don't have a cap and just have it at 5%?
That would just be a simple modification of what we do now, because right now it's just 10% with every cap. So which part are you looking for
Well, concerned about a situation where maybe $1,000 is not enough, that was something we can't change that. We have something to address Councilor Vino's concern about maybe larger developments that want to use this bylaw. Is there, would it hurt the whole situation if there was actually no cap? It costs what it costs, sort of thing.
Right, that's the current situation now.
Understood,
Right.
10%.
That's what we got.
At 10%.
That's right.
So you're reducing it to 5%.
That's a big one.
Which is good.
Yes.
So why are you putting a cap on it?
That was based on some direction from the last time I think council.
Yeah,
This would have been
that's
before
what I'm
you were
asking.
elected, so a couple months ago, I brought a recommendation, a simple reduction from 10% to 5%. The discussion at that time was that there was a desire to include some cap.
So I wasn't here, I would agree with you.
Okay.
But that's why I'm wondering why are we putting a cap on it if we're concerned about escalating costs? If it's being used, we're giving them the break they need, it's 5%. Why don't we just leave it at 5% without a cap? And that would give us, going forward, the flexibility to get into a situation you described. Just a thought. I
It's
just-
better than nothing, but
I agree with you in a way, but some of the residents would be paying for the big road, like if someone come in and had a 50,000 a year, they'd be paying a huge sum of the cost of administration versus the rest of them. Right? That's the way I see it. If I'm gonna pay $2,500 a year for 25 residents, and they're living on a road with 25 residents are paying $150 a year, then I'm sort of paying to have the other people go. That's what I think.
But it's all based on the size of the development, what the
Yeah.
cost per administrator.
so for me, I'm quite certain that individuals, property owners, and road association members will be thrilled.
5%.
Sure.
Just to
5%.
get
I
5%
agree.
and leave it there.
Yeah, and leave it at that, and leave it at that.
Yeah,
So,
no cap.
That's, that's.
If the wealth is there and the number of people are there and it goes above 5%. I know you only took direction from us last time. That doesn't mean we're on the same page
That's all
today.
right. That's why I'm here now, rather than going through the work of revising the bylaw.
So we're gonna leave it just 5%, forget it?
I'm fine with that.
Well, so am I, because and so should everybody on the roads, because it used to be 10%.
Yeah, no,
Up until-
I'm fine with that, and I have a few association roads in my district.
Okay, what's your next thing you want to know?
The other ones are more just sort of to let you know what I'm thinking about
Yeah.
needing to do, and if you have something to add, please do. The first one is around definitions, just to clarify, so from the conversations that have been had with residents looking to establish and already having established, there tends to be some confusion around a couple things in particular. And so we'd like to clarify those. So one of them is the definition of the term applicant. So for example, one of our neighboring communities in Kings clarifies that an applicant is to be a community association incorporated under the Societies Act. So we already have that requirement for anyone to participate in the program, but we have not clarified that as applying to applicants. So what we end up seeing is an individual owner or a handful of individual owners will come and instigate the process and drive a lot of work in our planning department. And then they go to their
Association.
neighbors, and the neighbors go, no, we don't want to do that. And so we end up having invested a lot of time and effort into something that did not have buy-in in the community in the first place. And so we think it would be valuable to.
And the association first.
Right, because it is a requirement in the end anyway, so if they are serious about taking part in the process.
Makes
I
perfect
agree
sense.
100% because my area had that very situation. And it created a lot of disruption in the neighborhood and it never, they tried it twice and it still didn't get approved as an association. So I agree.
Okay,
100%.
we're all good.
Yeah, that's really just changing when we would require that. It's already a requirement of participation, so. Okay.
Yeah.
The other one is just to clarify the term owner. There is already some wording clarifying the term owner, but in particular how it relates to the voting of the initial petition. There's been some complexities in particular around multiple owners of the same property. And so, for example, modal clarifies that if there are multiple owners, they have to be unanimous in support to be counted as supporting. If they are not in agreement as a group of owners, it's considered to be not in agreement for that owner's vote, because each property does not get multiple votes because they have multiple owners.
Well, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
They should agree amongst themselves.
That's what we have.
In practice, it's how we've been doing it. It's just not clarified, so it has created a lot of issues for the staff trying to clarify that with people.
It says property with multiple owners is considered as one property, one owner.
So they got, somebody has to speak
If
for
if
them.
they can't agree, then they don't have a vote.
Yeah, and some of them have been making the argument that, well, if I agree, but my co-owner doesn't, we should count that as half a yes vote, right? So we just want to clarify that this is, they are non-divisible votes essentially.
Okay, clarify it.
Yeah.
Oh, what Derek might not want you to.
No, yeah, well, you're throwing around acronyms that for me, you're
Oh,
telling me all this.
Municipality of the District of Lunenburg.
Thank you.
Okay, continue on.
Apologies. The last one that I'd like to talk about is just the option for including new funding allocations. So for an established road association that is now participating, right now we have 4 options for how we can allocate the costs out. They are by assessed value, they are or by property, or by owner, or by road frontage. Those are the 4 options we've allowed in the current bylaw. Some other municipalities, as well as the desire of some residents who are applying into this, would like us to consider other options such as by lot with an adjustment for developed versus vacant land, or seasonal versus year-round residents.
I'd like to say seasonal versus year-round. Property there.
I think more common, it's the developed versus vacant, is the one that pops up. I think it's, if there was a desire to revise the number of options or provide additional options for funding allocation under the bylaw, I'd be happy to take that direction now, and then we can work that into the work on the bylaw.
I sort of don't disagree with that one. Some of these lots, in my experience, they bring it in the summer, their summer trailer, or summer places for summer, they're using it, they have fire service, they have, they're back there cutting wood, they have access to the road, they use the road, so I don't think that should be an option, but they could be doing.
Me either, because you still need fire protection, you need all that. I've had that discussion just the other week with people. Yeah.
Well, typically municipal services are not seasonal.
No, our garbage truck's going back one way or the other, right?
No. Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just leave it alone.
So I think that covers off the 3 things I had here, but just in general, if there's any other items that anybody at this table thinks that we should be considering before we go in and start amending the wording of the bylaw, I'd be happy to hear
We just want to see the new draft.
it. All right.
Like the changes that you recommended, and especially with the because I had the same situation, someone that applied and probably made work for the staff, and come to find out that there wasn't an agreement, so that, you know, we do that a few times, yeah, so I like that change, especially.
I think that'll help cut down.
There may be a way to sort of stop that from happening, or I put in a way, and have a straight up cost. People are gonna come into this town and say, we'd like to have this option that we put a charge on staff putting the time into starting the process.
Well, in a way, that is, I mean, there is a cost, I'm not sure exactly what it is, I don't think it's much, to register with the Societies Act.
It is.
And so we're not taking that money, but we are ensuring that there is agreement enough within the community that it is more likely to lead to situations where we will start recovering costs through the administration fees.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it'll kind of fix things up in a couple different ways.
Tina?
Thank you. Just as a question, I just took a quick scan through a couple of last budgets that we've had the last couple of years, and I remember seeing in one budget, I just can't put my eye on it right now. So I know it exists, and you've shared it with us, or previous directors have. Could you just flip us a list of the road associations, if that's okay, and no rush on that, the list of the existing road associations, because I'm just curious, kind of going forward from here.
It just, yeah, so
Thank
yeah,
you for that.
know how many, who they are, where they are.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so we're on to 9.4, request for decision, financial and tax adjustment due to fire.
We can make a motion on those.
Well, no, he's gonna bring back a draft, drafts good enough.
Yeah, I'll take the direction for those things and we'll work those into the bylaw. All right, next one is a little more simple. There was a fire on October
Place burned
24th
down.
at 245 Lakewood Drive in Chester Grant. There's been a request on behalf of the owner to revise the taxable amount for the year. We've made that adjustment through input from TDSC. The adjustment is for $64.39. And so the council to approve us to do that if so desired.
Motion to approve. Sorry, Sharon.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go.
I'll move that we approve that.
And I'll second.
Second discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. That's it for you, I think.
It is for me today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, community development recreation designated community fund request from Chester Minor Hobby.
Simple, is there money? I'll move to approve that.
Second.
Discussion,
What are we voting on? Sorry.
to give them their money, we collected for them and give,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, you're too quick for me.
All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. 9.6, we have a district grant request. And it's from Chester Area Middle School. Yeah.
Yes, that's a request that came in late. And requesting $900 funds to be used to provide a turkey dinner to all students, faculty and support staff. Hopefully at no charge to them. Councilor Church and I have discussed this and we're going to make a motion, make a joint motion, Chair, for the two. That we provide the $500 out of district free budget and the other $400 out of Councilor Church's budget.
Second that motion.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Yeah, we just, the floor sites for having theirs today and I'm no longer allowed to go serve.
Can we make that a joint motion with Councilor Church and I don't know how that works.
Well, it was moved and seconded that 500 come from one district and 400 come from the other.
I want the record to show the chair was, there was a joint recommendation we're making, sort of, because it's coming out of our two budgets. I was hoping she would second it.
Well, anybody can second.
I
it.
understand, topics are important sometimes.
But we've already voted on
Good, just one.
it.
What does the motion say?
It says to give 400 or 500 it is, or whatever.
That was her budget. I thought she should be part of the.
I know, but council can make motions if they, whoever.
I think historically, though, you don't make a motion on our personal, those budgets. We do that. Anyway,
Well, I think we do actually.
well,
Someone else could have moved and seconded it, but in
I
this
know they could
case,
have, but.
yeah.
I'll rescind my motion. That makes it easier. I'll rescind that motion and then you can put it there.
My point is,
We need a motion to rescind. Move, do we have a second or to rescind the motion?
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Now, do you want to make a
I'll make
motion?
the same motion. The 500 from my budget, 400 from Councilor Church's budget.
Would you second that, please?
I'll second that.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried.
You have to get used to picking this word.
The simple fix.
I'll try.
It's so constitute topics.
Well, I know, but it's just. Unless I'm missing something, we're finished.
I just wanted to bring up one item. I know at the last meeting, we talked about plowing of the roundabout.
Yeah,
And I did reach out and I guess the consent is from the community that we want to promote a walkable community. And we sort of knew the answer, and it's access to the trail or corridor. And the other thing, it's really could be a safety issue, because if they plow the road and they're plowing it there and it, just the way it is, and the level, it's not level, it'll run back onto the road. So I mean, if the sidewalk is plowed, it will help. Probably they'll have to move the snow. Really, if it gets.
There's nowhere to put it.
There's nowhere to put it, so I guess we did the right thing or for the community, and we'll see how it works
Yeah,
out.
now we're gonna have a discussion with the Department of Transportation, see how it's gonna,
Yeah.
what we're gonna do with it.
Perfect example is just coming through the roundabout today.
Yes,
For those of us that came through the roundabout, it might have been just Della and Sharon, myself,
Yeah.
three of us. Thought about it when I was going through the roundabout. I was thankful to be that much closer to go to Chester. That was my first thought. You know, as I proceed from Aldersville to Chester. But then my second thought went back to last week's meeting. And absolutely,
yeah, and, well, like today, it would be rather dangerous to try, if you wanted to walk on the roadway. It's not a safe roadway to be walking on around.
I just hope they do a better job plowing than they did the sidewalks in Western Shore.
Well, there you go.
I walked there and I don't know, it looked like Stevie Wonder plowed the sidewalk because they tore everything up on the. I sent an email to Public Works to check it out. They really dug the grass up really bad. I don't know if they, I don't know what they did. They destroyed some of the sidewalk itself, the edging. It's just a mess. So I brought it forward to Public Works, but I just hope they do a better job. I don't know what they were doing, but it's not very good. I don't know what the sidewalks were like in other areas done. But I know because I walk every day there. I took pictures and something, and they were gonna check it out. So make sure that Gerhardt's does a. I don't know what if they plowed it with a half-ton truck or, but it was not very well done.
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break, then we're gonna come back in camera.
Yeah.